I never believed in monsters until I saw one through my drone camera. What happened to me and my girlfriend in the Oregon wilderness changed everything I thought I knew about what lives in our forests. The footage I captured should have been impossible, but it's sitting right here on this micro SD card, proof that we are not alone in the wild. My name is John, and I've been hiking and exploring remote areas for over 10 years. I love the solitude, the challenge, and the incredible views you can only get miles away from civilization. About 3 years ago, I started bringing a drone along to capture aerial footage of the landscapes I visit. There's something magical about seeing a mountain range or forest canopy from above that you just can't experience from the ground. Susie and I had been planning this particular trip for months. We wanted to explore a section of the Cascade Range in Oregon that few people ever visit, a dense, old-growth forest area about 40 miles east of Eugene. The terrain is rough, with thick canopy cover and steep ravines that make it nearly impossible to access by vehicle. You have to hike in at least 12 miles from the nearest logging road, which keeps most casual hikers away. We started our journey on a crisp October morning. The weather forecast looked perfect, clear skies for 3 days with temperatures in the mid-60s. We packed light but brought enough supplies for 4 days, just in case we decided to extend our stay. My drone equipment added some extra weight, but I never regretted bringing it on these trips. Some of my best footage had come from remote locations just like this one. The first day of hiking went exactly as planned. We followed old deer trails through towering Douglas firs and western hemlocks, some of them easily over 200 feet tall. The forest floor was thick with ferns and moss, creating an almost prehistoric atmosphere. Every so often, we'd catch glimpses of snow-capped peaks through breaks in the canopy. It was the kind of pristine wilderness that makes you feel like you're walking through an untouched world. By late afternoon, we'd covered about 8 miles and found a perfect spot to make camp for the night. A small clearing beside a creek with enough open sky above to launch the drone. After setting up our tent and getting a fire started, I decided to send the drone up for some sunset shots. The golden hour lighting filtering through the forest canopy would make for incredible footage. I launched the drone from the clearing and sent it climbing above the tree line. The view was spectacular, endless green forest stretching in every direction, broken only by the occasional rocky ridge or distant peak. I was flying in a slow, wide circle about 300 feet above the canopy when something caught my eye on the camera screen. At first, I thought it was just a shadow between the trees. But as I adjusted the camera angle and zoomed in slightly, I realized it was moving. Not like a deer or elk would move, but upright on 2 legs. The figure looked massive, easily 7 or 8 feet tall, walking purposefully through a gap in the forest about half a mile from our camp. My heart started racing. I called Susie over to look at the screen, and we both watched in disbelief as this enormous bipedal figure moved through the trees. It was covered in dark fur or hair, and its proportions were all wrong for a human. The shoulders were incredibly broad, the arms were longer than they should be, and it moved with a fluid, powerful gait that looked almost mechanical in its efficiency. The creature was heading roughly northwest, following what appeared to be a natural corridor through the forest. I tried to keep the drone camera focused on it, but the thick canopy made it difficult to maintain visual contact. Every few seconds, the figure would disappear under particularly dense tree cover, only to emerge again 20 or 30 yards ahead. We watched for maybe 3 minutes before the creature vanished into an especially thick section of forest and didn't reappear. I flew the drone in wider circles, scanning the area where I'd last seen it, but there was nothing. It was like the thing had simply melted into the wilderness. Neither of us spoke for several minutes after I brought the drone back to camp. We just sat by the fire, trying to process what we'd seen. Part of me wanted to believe it had been a bear standing upright, or maybe even another hiker in dark clothing. But I knew what I'd seen, and it didn't match any rational explanation. The footage was crystal clear. Whatever that thing was, it wasn't human, and it definitely wasn't a bear. The way it moved, the size of it, the proportions, everything about it screamed that this was something else entirely, something that wasn't supposed to exist. As darkness fell, we made a decision that would change everything. Instead of staying put and reviewing the footage properly, we decided to investigate. The rational part of my brain was screaming that this was a terrible idea, but curiosity won out. We had to know what we'd seen. We packed a small day pack with water, flashlights, and emergency supplies, then set out toward the area where the creature had disappeared. Using the drone footage as a guide, I was confident I could find the general location, even in the dark. The corridor it had followed looked like it might be an old game trail, or possibly even a remnant of a long abandoned logging road. The hike through the forest at night was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. Our flashlight beams created a small bubble of visibility in an ocean of absolute darkness. Every sound seemed amplified. The crack of twigs under our feet, the rustle of leaves in the wind, the distant hoot of an owl. Several times we had to stop and listen, convinced we'd heard something large moving through the underbrush nearby. It took us almost 2 hours to reach the area where I'd last seen the creature on the drone footage. By then, it was nearly midnight, and the temperature had dropped significantly. We found what appeared to be the game trail the thing had been following, a narrow path through the trees that showed signs of regular use by large animals. We spent about 30 minutes searching the immediate area with our flashlights, looking for tracks, broken branches, or any other sign that something massive had passed through recently. The forest floor was soft with decades of fallen leaves and organic matter, but we couldn't find any clear footprints or other evidence. What we did find were some unusual structures. About 50 yards off the main trail, we discovered what looked like a rough shelter built from fallen branches and logs. It was large enough for something the size of what we'd seen to take cover inside. But it could have been natural, just the random arrangement of deadfall that you sometimes find in old forests. Near the shelter, we found several trees that had been stripped of their bark in long, vertical gouges. The marks were too high off the ground to have been made by any normal forest animal, and they looked fresh. Whatever had made them had considerable strength and reach. By this point, we were both getting seriously spooked. The forest around us felt different than it had during the day, more menacing, more alive with unseen presence. Every shadow beyond our flashlight beams seemed to hide potential threats. We decided to head back toward our camp, but realized we had a problem. In our excitement to investigate, we'd wandered much further from the main trail than we'd intended. The game path we'd been following branched and curved in ways that made it difficult to retrace our steps in the dark. After wandering for about an hour, we had to admit we were lost. The smart thing would have been to stay put and wait for daylight, but we were both too keyed up to make rational decisions. Instead, we decided to find a relatively safe spot and set up a temporary camp for the night. We found a small clearing surrounded by large trees that would provide some protection from the wind, and settled in to wait for morning. We didn't bring our tent or sleeping bags on this nighttime expedition, so we just wrapped ourselves in the emergency blankets from our day pack and tried to stay warm. Neither of us was planning to sleep anyway. The adrenaline from what we'd seen, combined with being lost in an unfamiliar part of the forest, had us both wide awake and alert. That's when things got truly terrifying. Around 2 a.m, we started hearing sounds that didn't belong in any normal forest. Low, guttural growls that seemed to come from multiple directions at once. They weren't like any animal sounds I was familiar with. too deep and resonant to be from a cougar, too structured and purposeful to be from a bear. The growls would start in one area, then stop and resume from a completely different direction. It was like whatever was making them was moving around us in a wide circle, staying just beyond the range of our flashlights. When we swept our beams toward the sounds, they would immediately stop, leaving us staring into empty forest. After about an hour of the psychological torture, we started seeing shapes moving between the trees. Large, upright figures that would appear at the very edge of our vision, then vanish the moment we turned our lights toward them. They stayed far enough away that we couldn't make out any details, but there was no mistaking their size and posture. There were at least 3 of them, possibly more. They seemed to be coordinating their movements, appearing and disappearing in a pattern that kept us constantly on edge. One would show itself to our left, drawing our attention, while another would move through the trees to our right. They were hunting us, studying us, playing with us like cats with mice. The most unnerving part was their silence when they moved. Despite their massive size, they made almost no sound as they traveled through the forest. Occasionally, we'd hear a branch crack or leaves rustle, but nothing proportional to what creatures of that size should have been producing. They moved through the wilderness like ghosts. Around 4 a.m, the psychological pressure became too much. When one of the figures appeared closer than before, maybe 60 feet away between 2 large trees, we made the worst possible decision. We ran. Crashing through the dark forest with nothing but small flashlights to guide us was absolute madness. Branches whipped at our faces, roots and fallen logs tried to trip us with every step, and we had no idea where we were going. But the alternative, staying put while those things closed in on us, seemed even worse. The moment we started running, the forest exploded with sound. The creatures were no longer trying to stay hidden. We could hear them crashing through the underbrush all around us, keeping pace easily despite the rough terrain. Their movements were coordinated and purposeful. They were herding us, driving us in a specific direction. What terrified me most was that they could have caught us at any time. These things were clearly built for this environment while we were stumbling around like helpless city dwellers, but they didn't attack. They just followed, always staying close enough that we knew they were there, but never quite showing themselves completely. We ran for what felt like hours, but was probably only 20 or 30 minutes. Finally, when our legs gave out and we couldn't take another step, we collapsed between 2 massive cedar trees. The thick trunks provided some psychological protection, though we knew it wouldn't stop anything that determined to reach us. We huddled there in complete terror, listening to the sounds of large bodies moving through the forest around us. Sometimes the sounds would fade, giving us hope that they had lost interest, but then they'd return, closer than before. It was like they were taking turns watching us, making sure we didn't try to escape. The waiting was unbearable. Every minute stretched into what felt like an hour. We didn't dare use our flashlights except for brief moments to check our immediate surroundings. The batteries were running low anyway, and we needed to conserve what power we had left. Gradually, as the hours passed, the sounds became less frequent. By the time the first hint of dawn started filtering through the canopy, the forest had returned to normal. Bird calls replaced the ominous growls. The oppressive feeling of being watched lifted. Whatever had been stalking us through the night had finally moved on. We didn't move from our hiding spot until full daylight. Even then, we spent a long time listening and watching before we dared to venture out. The forest looked completely different in the morning light. Peaceful, beautiful, nothing like the nightmarish landscape we'd experienced in the darkness. Our first priority was finding our way back to the real campsite. Without the drone for aerial reconnaissance, we had to rely on basic navigation skills and luck. Fortunately, we eventually found a stream that looked familiar, and by following it downstream, we managed to locate the creek that ran past our original camp. What we found there made our blood run cold. Our campsite had been completely destroyed. The tent was shredded to pieces, scattered across the clearing like confetti. Our sleeping bags had been torn apart, their fillings spread everywhere. Food packages were ripped open and strewn about, though interestingly, none of the food appeared to have been eaten. Most devastating of all, our drone was smashed to pieces. The expensive camera and gimbal system were completely destroyed, scattered in fragments across the campsite. It looked like something incredibly strong had grabbed the drone and systematically torn it apart piece by piece. But here's the thing that saved everything. I'd removed the micro SD card from the drone the night before, after we'd seen the creature on the camera. It was a habit I'd developed on all my hiking trips, removing the memory card each evening and keeping it in a secure pocket of my jacket. The card containing the footage of that massive bipedal figure was safe. Standing in the ruins of our campsite, the implications hit me like a physical blow. These creatures, whatever they were, had specifically targeted our technology. They'd destroyed the drone with surgical precision while leaving other items relatively untouched. They knew we'd recorded them, and they'd tried to destroy the evidence. The intelligence this demonstrated was terrifying. These weren't just large animals acting on instinct. They understood cause and effect, they could problem solve, and they had some concept of technology and its potential threat to them. They'd stalked us through the night not to kill us, but to drive us away from our camp so they could eliminate the proof of their existence. Why didn't they just kill us? That question haunted me then, and still does now. They clearly had the ability. We were completely helpless, lost in their territory with no way to defend ourselves. But they chose not to harm us directly. Maybe they understood that our disappearance would bring searchers, creating more problems for them. Maybe they had some kind of code against killing humans. Or maybe they were just intelligent enough to know that fear was a more effective weapon than violence. We didn't waste time analyzing the destruction. We grabbed what few intact supplies we could find, mainly items that had been stored inside our backpacks, which had been tossed around but not completely destroyed, and got out of there as fast as possible. The nearest town was over 20 miles away, but we were willing to hike straight through to reach civilization. The journey back to the trailhead was a nightmare of exhaustion and paranoia. Every sound in the forest made us jump. Every shadow between the trees could have been one of those massive figures watching us. We pushed ourselves harder than we ever had before, driven by the absolute certainty that we needed to get out of that forest immediately. When we finally reached our car at the trailhead parking area, we sat in it for a long time without saying anything. The normal world, paved roads, cell phone signals, other humans, felt surreal after what we'd experienced. Part of me wondered if we'd somehow imagined the whole thing, if stress and darkness had made us see things that weren't really there. But then I remembered the micro SD card in my pocket. The proof was right there, recorded in high-definition video. When I got home and loaded the footage onto my computer, there it was. Clear, undeniable evidence of something that wasn't supposed to exist. The creature in the footage is exactly as I remembered it. Massive, bipedal, covered in dark hair, moving through the forest with impossible grace and purpose. The video quality is good enough to see details, the way its shoulders move, the length of its arms, the fluid coordination of its gait. This isn't a bear, it isn't a person in a costume, and it isn't a hoax. I've watched the footage hundreds of times now, analyzing every frame. I've showed it to friends, posted it online, and sent it to researchers who study cryptid sightings. The reactions are always the same: disbelief, followed by fascination, followed by uncomfortable questions about what this means for our understanding of the natural world. Some people think I should take the footage to scientists or government agencies. Others think I should keep it secret, arguing that revealing the existence of these creatures would be dangerous for them and for us. I honestly don't know what the right answer is. What I do know is that there are things living in our remote wilderness areas that we don't understand. They're intelligent, they're organized, and they're very good at staying hidden. The only reason I got any footage at all was pure luck, being in the right place at the right time with the right equipment. The experience changed both of us permanently. Susie rarely wants to go on extended hiking trips anymore. And when she does, she insists on staying in well-traveled areas with plenty of other people around. I still hike, but I'm much more cautious about where I go and how long I stay. The wilderness will never feel the same to me. Sometimes I wonder if we were meant to see what we saw. Maybe those creatures allowed themselves to be filmed for reasons we can't understand. Maybe they wanted proof of their existence to reach the outside world, but on their terms. Or maybe it really was just an accident, a momentary lapse in their otherwise perfect ability to remain hidden. I keep thinking about the intelligence they demonstrated, the way they coordinated their movements during that terrifying night, the precision with which they destroyed our technology while leaving us unharmed, the fact that they somehow understood what the drone represented and why it needed to be eliminated. These weren't animals acting on instinct. These were thinking beings with their own agenda, their own society, their own reasons for staying hidden from human civilization. They'd been sharing the wilderness with us for who knows how long, invisible and undetected, until one afternoon when my drone happened to catch one of them in the open. The footage raises more questions than it answers. How many of them are out there? How long have they been in our forests? Do they have language, culture, technology of their own? Why do they work so hard to stay hidden? And what would happen if the outside world truly acknowledged their existence? I'm not sure I want to know the answers to those questions. What I can say with absolute certainty is that we are not alone on this planet. In the deepest, most remote corners of our wilderness, there are others. They're watching us, studying us, staying just out of sight. They're intelligent enough to understand our technology and sophisticated enough to counter it when necessary. The micro SD card sitting on my desk contains 4 minutes and 37 seconds of footage that could change everything we think we know about the natural world. But I've learned that having proof and being able to do something with that proof are two very different things. Every time I look at the forest now, I wonder what's looking back at me from between the trees. Every camping trip, every hike, every moment alone in the wilderness carries the possibility of another encounter. Part of me hopes it never happens again. Another part of me can't stop searching for them. The creatures in the Oregon forest taught me that the world is far stranger and more dangerous than I ever imagined. They also taught me that sometimes the most terrifying thing isn't what you see, it's knowing that something is out there seeing you. I still have the footage, I still have the proof. But I also have the memory of that night in the forest, surrounded by massive figures moving silently through the darkness, and I know that some truths are too dangerous to share. The forest keeps its secrets for a reason, and maybe after what I experienced, that's exactly how it should be. For more interesting stories, check this one out.